Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Jen Marples Show. Today, I have a gorgeous guest. Her name is Bonnie Wan, and she's a badass, ladies. Get ready. She is the head of brand strategy and a partner at a very fancy, well-known advertising agency called Goodbye Silverstein Partners. And she was just named in 2022 Chief Strategy Officer of the Year by Ad Age magazine, which is the de facto pub in the advertising world. So that's a huge honor. And she's the author of the Life Brief, and she's going to tell you about that. And right before we got on, she just told me that she shipped off her final pages to her editors. So she just put her book baby to bed. She just put it to bed, which is huge. So congratulations, Bonnie. But before we get into all that, here's a warm welcome to the show. I am so excited that you're here, ladies. You are going to love listening to Bonnie and all of her wisdom. And we're going to dig into the Life Brief, and it is life changing. And I've experienced that for myself, and I'll go into that in a bit. But Bonnie, welcome. I'm so excited to dig into all the things with you today.
Thank you, Jen. Like I said, right before we got on, it is a huge honor. I love being reconnected with you. And, just to be on your show is so much fun.
For having fun. Like if we can have, let's like have more fun. Let's do work.
More
fun. Like more fun, please. And I think that's the secret sauce, right? Let's add a little bit more fun into the world. So before we dig into all the things you're doing right now today in your book, baby, tell us how you got into advertising. Tell us all the things, family life, like where did Bonnie start? Where did she go? How did you get to where you are today?
Okay, if we stripped it all the way back, I immigrated from Taipei, Taiwan to Los Angeles when I was 6 years old. And that was really a monumental transition for me that I've, spent a whole lifetime unpacking. And growing up in, I think growing up as an outsider, I'd say I was a latchkey kid in the 70s. My brother and I were in this really small town in Los Angeles. Many people didn't even know it existed. It had all these natural boundaries. It's called El Segundo. Now everyone knows about it. So different today. But it was really middle class, it was white, it was conservative. It might as well have been in Kansas. And at least that's what it felt like for me. And I was a shy, brown, bucktooth girl, terribly shy, terrifyingly shy. And that just gave me kind of an advantage. I was always fascinated with watching people on the playground. And I think there I was ignited by a fascination about what drives people, what makes people tick. And it really started in elementary school and then middle school, watching how middle schoolers socialize and interact. And I think I always wondered, what makes one person stand up, rise to a challenge, whereas it makes some other people duck or hide or pull away. And so I guess being the quiet, shy outsider gave me a real strategic advantage, which then became my career, which as a brand strategist, I went to New York and I went to NYU. And that's when I more or less found this amazing intersection of creativity and business. My parents, having brought us all the way over here from Asia, for a better life, said, you know what, Bonnie, we love that you do this art thing, but artists are poor. And so we will fund you to go to medical school, law school, or business school, but not art school. And then, later in my years in advertising, I had to say, Mom and Dad, guess who makes the most money in advertising? The creative people. But that's a whole nother story. But I think when I, fell into New York and discovered that, hey, wow, there's this amazing thing that I get to pay to do, which is be surrounded by creative misfits who never grow old. And I get to study people. And I get to study and get paid to study what makes them tick. And that's really been the trajectory of my careers. And now as a brand strategist, I'm a career brand strategist. I've been doing it for 3 decades now. And the fascination for me never gets old in terms of what drives people, what motivates them, what helps them change behaviors, and then change their stories and change their lives.
Ooh, okay. So there's a couple things there to unpack. One, it sounds like you have the most fun and the best job in the world right now doing what you're doing. Two, I didn't know that you actually came over from Taipei. We hadn't had this conversation before. I lived in Taiwan. My husband and I lived in Taipei for a year and a half. Right after we got married, when I was 28, ages 28 to 30, we lived in Taipei.
What?
So we are going to
No,
have
we
to
didn't.
talk about this. How did I not, like, we've talked a lot about ladies and gentlemen, you heard it here first. I've said it on the show before, but I didn't know. So we're gonna have to talk after this podcast. We want to bore all you guys with the details of Taipei, but woo, synergies. But we love
It's the
living there.
place.
Yeah.
Oh, who doesn't? I have been trying to go back forever.
Yeah, it's
The
on
night
our
market,
list.
the island life, yeah, all of it. It's so good.
Din Tai Fun. You heard it here first, people. Like the best dumplings in the world. They're Din Tai Funs all over the world. So they're not just in California, not just in Taipei. They're everywhere. And just now saying that is making me drool.
Me too. We go to the one in Vegas, in Seattle. My husband's from Washington, so anytime we're in Seattle, my kids would live at Ding Tai Fung if they could.
Oh my God. And I wanted to say something funny. One of my dear friends, Norma Kwan, she was on the podcast and she was my client when Whole Foods was my client when I had my PR firm. And she also went the marketing route. And so she was like the black sheep in the family because everyone was doctors, lawyers, and everything. So it's always it's a recurring theme. It's so funny, but you're like, haha, I'm just sort of the head of this badass advertising agency right now, mom and dad and everybody else in the world. But we all digress. I just can't believe we didn't have that conversation before about Taipei. So I won't go too off piece, people.
We're going to have many future conversations now.
Yes, we are. We're going to get into it. I'll tell you exactly where we lived and what we did, and you'll know all these places. I can't wait to have that conversation with you. But tell us about your book. Tell us about this whole process of the life brief. So that is this new, well, it's this thing you've birthed, and it came out of all the creative strategy in this process you took clients through, right? So now you're making it more palatable, sort of for the everyday Joe like me who needs to needs a tool to help my life. And this is what we're going to kind of get into, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, there's no gentlemen, but gentlemen should be listening to this show. That's my new mission, hashtag men supporting women. They need to start listening to what we're talking about so they can understand us better. I digress. But take us through the life brief. I'm not going to explain it. You explain it because it's fabulous and wonderful. And we're going to get into all the nitty gritty details.
Okay, well, so as a brand strategist, my job is to make meaning out of messiness. That's, kind of how I distill it down. And what that means is usually big companies come to our agency. And the first thing before they talk about how they want to express themselves, how they want to drive culture, how they want to engage new audiences, is we have to uncover the essence of who they are. What do they stand for? What's in their DNA? Why do they exist? And the job of a brand strategist is to distill that down to the very essence and then express that in what I call sharp and sticky ways, like so clear, yet really inspiring and so memorable that it tattoos into your mind and heart, right? That's what a great strategy is. It doesn't live on paper, it lives in our minds. And then it drives every ambition and action from that place. So all clients start from that brand strategy, that place of a sticky and sharp organizing idea, we call it here. And we would do it for BMW, Frito-Lay, anything with an O's, Doritos, Cheetos, Comcast, and, all the tech companies. So that's what I've been conditioned to do. My reflex is to look through all the distraction, the mountains of messiness and data points and insights, and cut straight through to who are you? And then express that in a powerful, memorable way. Now, in 2010, I hit my own peak messiness, and that was in my marriage. And it was a crisis of meaning, a moment of despair. We had 3 kids. I now have 4. So the story goes on after this. But in 2010, I had 3 kids under 5 years old. My husband was trying to launch, a startup, a documentary film startup. And I was holding down the fort as the sole breadwinner and restaurant open 24/7. And, we were peak messiness, and we were also peak distraught in our marriage, really dancing on the cliff's edge of divorce, I'd say, though neither of us mouthed those words. We were arguing, mostly negotiating schedules. I have to say I was nitpicking, controlling. My inner perfectionist was roaring. He couldn't do anything right. And I felt he wasn't trying hard enough. So it was somehow our marriage had eroded into this relationship that felt more competitive than like partners. And that went on for a long time, and we just kind of stuffed it until I was parked at the supermarket in the parking lot, rainy day. I remember the rain pounding on the metal and glass. And I was going to do our weekly grocery shopping, and I couldn't get out of the car. I just couldn't move. And I called a friend, a really good friend from halfway across the world. And I admitted things that I think I had locked inside and didn't want to confront. And a lot of them were questions. Am I with the right person? Did I marry the right partner for me? God, we've created a really big life, Can I hold it all? And what if my answers to these questions are no? What then? And, the funny thing was, once voiced, I couldn't stuff them back. They were out in the ether. I'd expressed them. I'd said them out loud to a friend as a witness. And no, none of the answers came in the parking lot of the supermarket. We just go on with our days, but they're out there. They're kind of hanging there. And a few weeks later, I took a business trip down to see my parents. And I decided, instead of staying at a hotel, that my company was going to pay for, my client was going to pay for, I was just going to go home, eat my mom's food and kick off my shoes and sleep in my childhood bedroom. And I think something happens when you go back into the womb, almost, back into that childhood self. And I really was dancing around with the idea of, no, maybe I can't hold all of this together. And then I had a reflex. And I think in hindsight, there was a choice that was emerging. I was either going to tear this all down, or I was going to give it one last shot and do what my reflexes were telling me as a strategist: cut through the bullshit, cut through the messiness in my head, clouding my thoughts, and just cut right through to the essence. And there's a penetrating question that just really does that very simply. And I asked it to you and all the women in Palm Desert where we spent a weekend. But the question is, what do I want? And not the kind of, what do I feel like? What am I in the mood for? And certainly not what my parents want for me, what my best friend want for me, what did my husband want? It was in my heart of hearts. If I strip it all back, what do I really, really want? And that became the start of the return, I'd say. And that question helped me vomit out a series of declarations. What do I want? And I think there were 5 statements. I can't remember them all now, but I wrote them down because that's what strategists do. We record everything, right? We don't let anything go into the ether, the black hole of the universe, because if you lose it, it might have been gold. So strategists collect all the data. And I wrote down what I wanted. And when I stepped back and looked at it, something immediately punctured, which was my fear, my deepest, darkest fear, which is I want a divorce. But when I looked at the page, I realized, oh no, what I want is time. There's just one theme that came through all the scribbles, and it was about time. Time with my children, time with my husband, meaningful time, not just any time. We spent a lot of time in the same room, but real time. And I wanted time for myself. And there was a whole litany of other things I wrote down that all had to do with time in some shape or form. And suddenly all my fears were punctured and I could relax a little bit because I realized, oh no, my husband isn't the problem. Well, the problem is my relationship with time and how I was spending it. And from there, I was able to summarize that brief. I didn't know it was a brief. I didn't call it a brief then, but it was what was essential, what was foundational and fundamental and urgent. And I shot it off to my husband. And it was way late at this point. He had 3 kids. No way he was going to answer back. But he did. In a simple text, all caps, 3 exclamation marks, YES. Ho! The first moment of alignment we had in, dare I say, a year. And it was the first glimmer of hope that I felt. And from there, we were able to actually have a conversation, the first moment of connection. And the first moment of reigniting, I think, our sense of excitement and possibility for what we might create. And that's where it started. And that led us to a 6-year golden chapter. We still both call it our golden chapter, where we found the brief that we had written that night in Portland, Oregon, which meant we had to move from the Bay Area. And we did. And so many surprises and serendipitous gifts unlocked after we made the commitment to see that brief through. And in fact, we moved 4 months after writing the brief. So this was not like a long thing. We found this incredible community where everything was within a 1-block radius of our home. And, you know, the grocery store, the coffee shop, the pizza parlor, the school, the environmentally driven school that fit all our values. And then when I walked in to quit my job at Goodbye Silverstein Partners, they were like, oh, why quit? Why don't you do this from Portland, Oregon? And I was like, what? But I had already surrendered, right? I'm going to let go of this paycheck and the security that it gives me because I believe this brief showed up for a reason. And then I was gifted this amazing ability to keep my job. And I did it for 6 years. And then they made me partner and head of strategy.
Wow. Okay, so there's a lot to unpack here. And when your husband said yes, that got me emotional because I too, everyone's heard it here, been on a similar path, faced the impossible. And because of what Bonnie said in the desert, this retreat I've talked about, it was this one takeaway. And this is the power of Bonnie's words and what this process she's going to tell you guys about in a little bit more detail. this getting clear on what you want, it's really a fucking scary question to ask yourself, because I think we don't want to face that, because that means you have to deal with it. Like you said, it's now out there, right? It's now out there in the universe, and it's really scary. But I find too, and it just sparked a lot of conversation. And I just celebrated my 25th anniversary. There's all, it's life. There's all these ups and downs, right? Like all this shit, 27 years together. And we too have just kind of come because of this conversation on what do we want. And I think our future lies together, that it was that just having that conversation and listening to you, Bonnie, like had such a profound impact. And this is why I wanted to share her with all of you guys, because it's just getting clear and cutting through the shit. Like we're a team. So we came up with that. Like I left that retreat and I texted my husband that night. And of course, we all left the retreat and got back to real life, like soccer games, millions of miles away. And I sent my husband a simple text stating, "Thanks for everything you do for the family. You're a great dad." When was the last fucking
Mm.
time I did that? Have I ever done that? And I know it resonated. I've had this conversation, and Bonnie had us all in tears, everybody, because you really think about what do you want. And she's also a very eloquent storyteller. You've heard her tell that story, and we were all thinking about all of our relationships and what we want, and it's so powerful. And this goes into the whole midlife, and like let's leave. My theory, I think what's coming up for me is like, let's leave it all on the field, right? Like let's do it all and then come back together. We're a team. And so like you and your husband came back together as a team. So coming from that place of a team, like anything's possible. So I can't wait for this book to come out. But can you tell, like, so the women listening right now, they're like, okay, life brief, like, what do you want? Like, how do I apply this to my life? Like, are there like the top 3 things a woman can do right now to sort of take herself through the life brief to make a big change in her
Yeah.
life?
Oh yeah. So the book will lay out the whole framework, different exercises, different questions to help you kind of unearth it. It comes in 3 parts. Get messy so you can get clear, and then get active. But really, in a nutshell, it was all baked in the story I just told, right? If we wanted to strip it all back. But I think the first thing is getting messy is the thing that we all want to skip over. Just get to action. Why do we have to get messy and get clear? And like you said, questions, penetrating questions like, what do I really, really want? What do I want that I haven't yet admitted? Not only to everybody else, but even to myself, right? Somehow those questions can feel like a dangerous or forbidden act for many people. I have a woman who attended one of my retreats in Costa Rica, and she said, my parents always told me, never ask for what you want. That will only lead to disappointment. And I thought, oh, wow. Yeah, we have some really deeply ingrained stories and beliefs that we did not come up with necessarily through our own experience, but we adopted from the people who love us, who unintentionally pass these things down. But if you can get messy, and that does not take a whole lot of space. And penetrating questions are such a great way to get messy because they drive straight into your brain. And here's the thing that our brains like to do. They like to be good students. When asked a question, questions hijack our brain. And suddenly we want to be a good student. We want to come up with an answer. And suddenly an answer comes up from deep within us. And then we bat it down if it makes us slightly uncomfortable. So the first process, the first tip of the life brief is find your quiet. Stop doing. Stop checking the boxes, getting that to-do list done. I think we can be a society of addicted to productivity, right? A bias for action. We talked about this in work and, but just stop the binge, what do they call it? My teenagers call it the doom scrolling, the binge watching. Stop, if only for 10 minutes, and let the question sink in. Let it drop into you. And instead of approach it from your inner critic or inner judge, approach it with a beginner's mind. So let your curiosity lead. Distance yourself, disconnect from the emotional, oh no, that again, that sense of forbiddenness. Ask the question and then allow whatever comes up to come out and onto the page, meaning write it down without editing, without judgment. Because once you have it on the page, now you can be in relationship with it. You can look at it, and immediately when you look at it, you're going to have an emotion or a thought or another question. And now you are in a cycle of being in relationship with yourself. And that's where you get to deepen. And that's as simple as the practice is. And if you did that for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, if you dare, each day for 2 weeks, you'll have all these ingredients to write your life brief. And even if you didn't get to the declarative statement, the sticky, short, line, which for our first brief was take our time, meaning take back our time, take it under our control, and let's make it meaningful, right? There was so much behind that little sharp, sticky, handle or name, I call it. But if you didn't do any of that, if you didn't get that far, at least have the ingredients in front of you, revisit them, see how they make you feel. What are they saying to you? And my bet is you're going to have an aha or an insight or an illumination that, if you dare go further with it, will start to engage you in some clarity about what you really want. It's a simple practice. And I say practice because it gets easier the more you do it, the more you allow yourself to do it. And I say make it irresistible, so irresistible that it's inexcusable to do. So 5 minutes. Can you give up 3 minutes? If you can't give up 5 minutes, I mean, how many, how small can you make it so that it's irresistible and inexcusable? And if you do that practice, it just starts doing its own work on you.
So amazing. So is this the process you also take your clients through too? So you use this with clients so they get clear on what they want. You used it with your husband. And I think you've told me before too that you can use it with your kids. So it can help improve relationships with kids, family, that type of thing. Like, is there any?
I've done it for my parenting. My youngest is 10 now. My oldest is 19. My 19-year-old is now just starting to get curious about it. But I've talked to therapists. I've talked to the most badass people, professionals. Their kids don't want to listen to what they have to say until they're ready. So I think part of the treasure of the book is that I've written a playbook that each of them can dig into when they're ready for the process. Because I think we all have to come to it in our own time. And my 19-year-old is just starting to say, hey, Mom, I talked to somebody about it, and they were really curious, which made me curious. And I want to find out more about it. But has he read even a chapter? No, not yet. I've printed it out to him twice. But it has absolutely centered my parenting. It has centered my husband and I and got us aligned. My husband actually wrote the parenting brief in some of our most challenging years during the pandemic with our oldest, who was a teenager and going through a lot. He lost a friend in January 2020 to drugs. And then in March it hit and the lockdown, and we went through some really dark times with 4 kids, and we assumed that our oldest 2 were fine, that we really had to put our attention on our youngest 2. And little did we know that it was him that was falling and didn't know how to ask for help. And of course it came out in all sorts of ways that looked like misbehaving, or rule breaking. And it was really a desperate cry. And my husband went away, took 2 mornings at a cafe and wrote. And I had written a brief for myself around how to parent, or what I wanted in our parenting experience. And when my husband came back and shared his parenting brief with me, I threw mine immediately away. And I was like, okay, that's it. And, the name, we named it Love Him Through Accountability. But the declarative statements that led, that was the meaning behind that, was all about staying in the room, showing up and being there, not just talking at him, but really listening, allowing for the awkward silences, but also showing him that real love looks like this. Staying in the room during the hardest conversations. That real love isn't permissive. Real love holds you accountable. Real love believes that you can do more. Real love loves you through your hardest, messiest moments. And that brief got me out of bed at 2 a.m. when I had a giant pit in my stomach and did not want to go and engage. It kept me in the room when he was shouting, "Get out, Mom, stop it. I don't want to talk." It gave me the courage to stay in the conversation. And I'm so glad we did.
Oh my God, Bonnie, you just brought tears to my eyes, because I think all of you listening with kids, and we don't even know that impact of COVID, and having my own son who had his own anxiety and his own stuff going on, it's very powerful. And what you just said, I think that's going to have a huge impact. Hopefully you guys don't have to go back and listen to this. I'm going to go back and listen to this 100 times, because, and those are our most important relationships, as well as these babies, because they need us. And we're still reeling. We'll see the research about COVID and what it did to our teenagers and all that isolation and all the stuff. Yeah, kids being institutionalized, kids taking their life. I mean, there was a whole thing. I don't need to tell everybody all that went on, but I always railed against when everyone's like, "Oh, our kids are resilient." I'm like, we're not. We're grown ass adults aren't being resilient right now. So how are our little babies, our teenagers, being resilient? That was just a crock of shit. And I said, and we're coming from a privileged perspective. God help everybody else who is in very tenuous situations and can't even get to school. That's a whole other conversation. But that just warms my heart that worked. And that's just something to take away. It's like just sitting and showing that it's showing up. It's showing up in the hard times. And it's like our family values are what you just stated. This is what it looks like. There's rules. Oh my gosh, deep cleansing breath. Our babies, our sweet babies, Bonnie. Oh my God. And thank you
Parenting
for
is it's a delayed gratification job. I mean, there's no immediate gratification with it. And I'm so glad we made it through the pandemic, and we're not out of the woods, because parenting is a lifelong job, as you know.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, it is.
It's so beautiful to see him thrive.
And I'm so glad to hear that. And I know there's so many challenges out there for so many. And I just don't know that we just all need to talk about it more, because I think it's one of those things, oh, we're through. But the more and more I listen to experts, it's like we were all deeply traumatized, all of us, everyone. And we're just going about our lives like the pandemic never happened. Like people weren't locked in the basement for years. Our teens were locked in their bedrooms for years. All right. Thank you for sharing that and going deep that way. Because the more we talk about this stuff, that's my whole goal. It's like if somebody can take something away that's going to help them immediately go take action in their lives in any way, shape, or form. It's with a relationship with their kid, a spouse, a friend, a parent, then we've done our job, right? So before I switch the topic on the life brief, I know it's your book, baby. When is it going to come out? Because I feel like I need it to be out like right now today. But I don't think it is, because you just shipped it off to your publisher.
I did, but it's been a 3-year journey, but it is soon in comparison. So January 16th is the launch date. Pre-orders will start very soon.
Ooh.
I think midsummer. So in July. And for people who want to get into the practice now, I do a every 2-week newsletter where it's not about spam. It's not about promotion. It's really a reflection and an exercise every 2 weeks. And I find that it's just for a lot of people who've been doing this with me for a long time now, it's just, again, putting on that beginner's mind, starting with questions, not answers, and seeing where it takes you.
I love it because, this is a show to empower and help midlife women in myriad ways. I've got all different types of women on here sharing their expertise. And I think that big challenge is really, we're faced with that. We're wanting more, we're yearning for more. Something's bubbling up. We can all, there's those rumblings. So going through this process, everyone, just do it for yourself because it's the best thing you're going to do. It's going to give you clarity in so many different aspects of life. And we're going to get to all where your details are at the end, but I have a couple more questions to ask you because you are a fabulous, badass midlife woman with 4 children, big baddie at work, doing all the things. What do you think the biggest challenges are for women right now in midlife?
Oh gosh. I think you've named them all on your show, Jen. I mean, you're
Probably.
so good at naming all the challenges. But when I look at midlife, I see life in a series of 5 to 6 year chapters, and I love this idea of practicing because if you really understand it to be chapters rather than one long arc, then it's serial living and it's a lot of new beginnings and endings, and you get to reinvent and reimagine or reset every so many years. And I think that's what's been happening in my life. It's what happened when we moved to Portland, Oregon. And it was spurred by my longing to reimagine our relationship with time. I feel on the brink now of yet another, chapter. I don't know what it is, but this time my kids are grown, though I still have, my youngest is still 10, but my mom is aging. I think you've talked about that, our aging parents. And I think this is something else you've talked about is a calling to serve people in bigger ways, in meaningful and lasting ways. I've done all the outer career achievement. So I'm really focused in my midlife now on my inner game and how to really refine and tune my inner game. And I wrote a brief for my career ages ago. It was one of my earliest briefs, and it was about walking a path of fulfillment, not just achievement. And that was really, I think at the time when I got to do this amazing day job I have at this incredible storied creative agency, this island of creative misfits. But it was the birth of my joy hustle, which is what I call the life brief, where I get to, do what I do for companies, but unlock people and their sense of purpose, possibility, intention, imagination, and maybe expand what they believe is possible in their own lives, whether they're aiming it at the relationships that matter, their vocation, their side hustle, their day job, or most importantly, especially for women. So if we're going to talk about your audience, and our audience, our peers, themselves, because we're the last ones we feed and fuel, that we nurture and nourish. And a lot of the women that I teach this practice to, that is the source of craving, longing. They want to give back to themselves. And that's a really bold move for many women. And so when I talk about, hey, live right, write and live your boldest brief, I don't mean, hey, go big or go home, go swing it out of the park, go for a bigger title or an industry winning award. I actually mean sometimes the boldest thing we can do is step off the treadmill, slow it down, disconnect so that we can reconnect with ourselves. That's what bold looks like in midlife,
Ooh,
at
you
least for
nailed it.
me, many women I know.
I think you nailed it. Oh my God, Bonnie. And looking at life in chapters, no one has said that. And I'm grabbing onto that because I love it. Because yeah, there's so many
You've done
chapters,
it. I
so
see
many
it.
iterations.
Ah, yeah.
And this ain't gonna be
That's
the
what's
last thing I do.
exciting.
There's all these other things happening that we don't even know about because it won't come to us now. It'll come to us later. I love this. The chapters, it doesn't lock you in. I don't want anybody ever to feel like they're locked in. Just because you do one thing one way for 2 years doesn't mean, or even 2 weeks doesn't mean you have to keep doing it. Right.
That's right. And I think you could do your own. I've been a strategist before I knew that's what it was called, because I like to get to the essence of things, right? I do that work, that unlocking purpose and possibility work with my kids, with my husband, with the life brief, with companies. So it's the same role I play, and I get to do it everywhere with everyone, including myself.
I love it. And that's our most important relationship is the one with ourselves, or else everything else
100%.
falls apart. I mean, and that's, I think that reclamation and coming back and allowing to receive, to step off the treadmill or step on a treadmill if you haven't been on one for a while and that's calling to you. You get to do whatever you want. There's no judgment, right? Oh my God, I could talk to you for like ever, Bonnie. And luckily, I know where to find you. So we're going to keep talking.
But we're going to do this. We're going to do this.
We're going to do it. So my final thing for you is I would love you to finish the sentence for me. I'm not too fucking old too.
Create the life I want.
Yes. Mic drop. And you can keep creating again and again and again.
Again and again and again.
Oh, this has been so amazing. All right. So everyone is going to be obsessed with you and needing to find you. So where can they go? Where can they sign up for your newsletter and find more out about you and the life brief?
Everything is at thelifebrief.com. The newsletter updates about the book. And it's easy, simple, and I promise to be of service, to sell, not to sell, but to serve. And the book comes out in January 16th, 2024. And pre-order information will be right there on thelifebrief.com.
I love it. And don't be afraid to sell. I'm going to sell it for you. Buy the book. I am. So
Okay,
let's all
great.
support Bonnie.
I'll
She's
serve.
amazing. Let's buy the book. We've got to support our fellow women. And you obviously know this book is going to change your life. So get the book. Okay. So I'll sell it for you. Let's go. But sign up for Bonnie's newsletter. I'm going to sell it for you. Don't worry. Oh my God. It has been such a joy and a treasure and a treat to have you on my show today, Bonnie. Thank you for sharing everything with my listeners. Like this, I know we've just changed lives today with your information and your passion and just going deep and telling your very raw and real stories, which I know that's the way we change, is by going deep and so everybody knows that they're not alone. No one is alone in this journey called life.
Me. And every time we connect, I feel lit up inside. So thank you.
Oh my God, what a nice thing to say, Bonnie. Thanks for being here.